Friend of the channel, Zach, is desiring and expecting something big and magical to happen in meditation and on this pathless path. And he'd like to stop. That's a wonderful thing to like, Zach. Of course, I don't yet know the details on you and your path, but I'm going to speak on this topic generally, and hopefully there'll be some benefit for you and others in here. I used to imagine that awakening would be something like an acid trip. I thought ego death meant I'd never say anything I used to say, and I'd never act like I used to act. Of course, these assumptions weren't baseless. There's no shortage of stories of people having all kinds of wacky experiences on the path, kundalini explosions, visions of deities, full body orgasms. But I've come to see that these stories actually do more harm than good. Most of all because they are extremely desirable for those of us who want to get away from ourselves. I was suffering so much when I heard those stories for the first time that I just wanted my experience to be as different as possible from what it had been for 30 years prior. So I chased those descriptions, naive to the fact that what I was chasing was, of course, a mental image. And that mental image was based on someone else's description of a mystical experience, which can only ever be a caricature at best. Words can't adequately describe mystical experiences, just like music notation can't sound like actual music. But there's no ill will on the part of the people who tell those stories. At their best, those stories act as inspiration. And hey, if they get us on the path and keep us on the path, even if our motivation is a bit wonky at first, that's a good thing. On balance, far better that we chase mystical experiences than another line of cocaine. But Zach, your comment tells me you know that mystical experiences are not the goal. Actually, we can go further and say that no experiences are the goal, because experiences come and go. If what we're interested in is irreducible truth, freedom, liberation, we're interested in the basis of experiences, that which remains both in and in the absence of experiences. If we're dependent upon anything at all, visions, a certain kind of energy, a certain state of being, well, we're dependent. This is conditional. And the one thing we know about conditions is that they change. Jack Cornfield wrote a book called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. This book features accounts from folks who claimed they'd had genuine awakening, the kind of awakening from which there's no falling back. But these folks later experienced a change in conditions, which led to some kind of crisis that they found impossible to reconcile with their claims. For example, the dedicated American meditation teacher Jack writes about, who, after 2 decades of intense practice, finally realized the fullness of spiritual freedom with a guru in India. This teacher felt his path was complete and that he had transcended the troubles of the world. He returned to the West and began teaching, but then his life unraveled. His marriage fell apart. he experienced a profound crisis of grief, anger, and confusion. He felt unable to reconcile his enlightened state with the intense suffering he was experiencing. He felt like a fraud, believing he had failed and lost the very freedom he was teaching others to find. The root of this guy's problem was precisely that he conceived of enlightenment as a state with certain conditions. Those being that certain phenomena, certain stuff, in this case grief, anger, and confusion, are excluded. But enlightenment, on the contrary, is recognition of one's nature as the space in which all states, all emotions, all phenomena occur. We call this space awareness. The notion that afflictive emotions cannot arise in enlightenment is a misunderstanding. Enlightenment doesn't rip out our hearts and turn us into unfeeling spiritual zombies. Rather, in seeing that we are awareness and not its transient contents, the contents are realized to be self-liberating. The stories of masters who are truly beyond suffering are not stories of suppression or withdrawal from the human condition. They are stories of radical acceptance. In this acceptance, afflictive emotions lose their charge, and then indirectly, they tend to show up less and less often and with less and less intensity, until one day you say, wow, I haven't been upset for 6 years. This doesn't mean you don't shout fuck when you stub your toe, or that you don't defend yourself when someone tries to take advantage of you. In these situations, anger occurs as a natural response in the appropriate time, in the appropriate measure, rather like a sneeze. And this may look like anger from the outside, but the key difference is that it doesn't linger. So your marriage may break down, and there will of course be feelings around this, but you are not identified with these feelings, nor are you dissatisfied with them. And dissatisfaction, by the way, is an alternate translation of suffering. Feelings come and go like the weather. You get wet, but you don't catch a cold. And of course, you dry off naturally. Awareness is not in crisis when there is a divorce, just as the sky is not in crisis when there is a storm. The key point in awakening is to simply recognize your nature as the sky. From this vantage point, you see that all clouds come and go naturally, and so you stop demanding that they be this way or that. This is the end of suffering. How's that for a bit of magic, Zach? I'd love to hear your reflections and anyone else's in the comments.